I have a deep sense of what you're looking for. An emotionally charged narrative that will captivate viewers through authentic character development and a surprising ending, all structured in 4 interconnected chapters for maximum retention. Here's the complete script. I still remember the day my world collapsed like it was yesterday. The heavy oak doors of Sinclair and Associates law firm seemed to close behind us with an ominous finality. The Charleston name had meant something in South Carolina for generations. Old money, social standing, a legacy carefully curated over decades. But legacies, I would soon learn, can be as fragile as trust. My father, William Charleston III, had passed away 3 weeks prior after a sudden heart attack. None of us saw it coming. Not my mother Eleanor with her carefully maintained composure. Not my older brother James with his corporate ambitions. Not my sister Rebecca with her charitable foundation. And certainly not me, Charlotte, the youngest, and, as my father often said, the one with her head in the clouds. I was the family disappointment, the art history major who chose passion over pragmatism, the one who'd rather restore forgotten paintings than attend board meetings. The reading of the will should have been a formality. Father had always been meticulous about his affairs. The Charleston estate would go to Mother, the family business to James, the summer home to Rebecca, and I would receive a modest trust fund, enough to keep me comfortable without enabling what my father called my bohemian tendencies. We all knew the script. We'd been rehearsing it our entire lives. But then Mr. Sinclair, my father's attorney for over 30 years, cleared his throat and pulled out a sealed envelope I had never seen before. "Your father added this addendum to his will 1 week before his passing," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He instructed me to read it only after the formal will had been reviewed. The room fell silent. Mother's knuckles turned white as she gripped her handbag. James straightened his already impeccable tie. Rebecca's breathing became shallow, and I felt a strange prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if my body knew before my mind what was coming. "To my family," Mr. Sinclair began reading my father's words. "If you are hearing this, then I am gone, and it is finally time for the truth to emerge. The Charleston fortune, our position in society, the respect we command, it was all built on a lie. You could have heard a pin drop in that room." Mother gasped audibly. James leapt to his feet. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded. But Mr. Sinclair continued reading as if he hadn't spoken. 40 years ago, I made a choice that has haunted me every day since. My business partner and closest friend, Edward Thornton, developed the revolutionary software algorithm that became the foundation of Charleston Technologies. One night, after he'd shared his breakthrough with me over drinks, I saw my opportunity. While Edward slept off the celebration in my guest room, I copied his work and deleted his original files. The next morning, I convinced him he must have imagined his success in a drunken haze. When he insisted otherwise, I used my family connections to blackball him from every tech company on the East Coast. My mind flashed to the photograph on my father's desk. 2 young men in graduation gowns, arms around each other's shoulders, eyes bright with promise. I had asked about it once. "An old friend," Father had said dismissively. "We lost touch." Mr. Sinclair's voice continued, steady and unemotional, as if he weren't dismantling our entire reality. "Edward died in obscurity 10 years ago. I told myself I would make it right, that I would confess, but I was a coward. The lie had grown too big, had too many dependents, not just you, my family, but our employees, our investors, our charitable foundations. So I lived with my shame, building a philanthropic legacy I hoped would somehow balance the cosmic scales." Mother was openly weeping now, her perfect makeup creating dark rivers down her cheeks. Rebecca had gone completely still, like a statue of herself. James was pacing, his expensive shoes clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. But a terminal diagnosis has a way of clarifying one's priorities. The letter continued, delivering another shock. Terminal diagnosis. Father had told us it was a routine checkup that had discovered a minor heart condition. "I have 6 months to live, and I cannot take this secret to my grave." Edward had a daughter. Her name is Meredith Thornton. She lives modestly as a mathematics professor at Charleston College, never knowing how close she came to inheriting a fortune. The name hit me like a physical blow. Professor Thornton. Brilliant, kind Professor Thornton, who had helped me with the geometric patterns in Renaissance art when I was struggling in my senior year, who had written me glowing recommendations for graduate programs, who had once mentioned offhandedly that her father had been in tech before things went sideways. Therefore, I am amending my will as follows. The majority of the Charleston fortune, including controlling interest in Charleston Technologies, will go to Meredith Thornton as rightful heir to her father's innovation. My family will retain the properties and enough funds to live comfortably, though not lavishly. This is not the justice Edward deserved, but it is the closest approximation I can offer now. James exploded. This is preposterous. Clearly, Dad was not in his right mind. We'll contest this immediately. But Mr. Sinclair shook his head. Your father anticipated that reaction, Mr. Charleston. He underwent extensive psychological evaluation before making these changes. The documentation is ironclad. There must be something we can do, Mother whispered, looking suddenly older than her 60 years. There's more, Mr. Sinclair said quietly, returning to the letter. My dear family, I know this comes as a devastating shock. You have built your identities around wealth you believed was rightfully yours. But I have watched each of you closely over the years, and I believe you all have the strength to redefine yourselves without the crutch of the Charleston name and fortune. Father's words cut through me. Had I been using our family name as a crutch? Even as I rejected the business world, hadn't I relied on the safety net it provided? Eleanor, your social standing was always more important to you than our marriage. Perhaps with less wealth to manage, you might find what truly brings you joy. Mother's sob was a wounded animal sound. James, your ruthless pursuit of profit above all else reminds me too much of myself at your age. This forced step back may be your salvation. My brother's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Rebecca, your charitable work is commendable, but it has been a way to assuage guilt you shouldn't have to carry. You are more than your family's reputation. My sister's blank expression didn't change, but a single tear tracked down her cheek. And Charlotte, I froze as my name was read. My dreamer, you've always sensed something wasn't right with our family, haven't you? That's why you kept your distance, why you chose a path so different from what was expected. Of all my children, you may be the best prepared for this new reality. In fact, I've left instructions for Meredith to offer you a position helping catalog and manage the art collection, should you be interested. The room spun around me. A job offer? From the woman who was inheriting what should have been ours? The absolute audacity of my father, even from the grave. As Mr. Sinclair folded the letter, the final words hung in the air between us. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I do ask that you find a way forward that honors the best parts of yourselves, not the worst parts of your inheritance. With profound regret and enduring love, William Charleston III. The following days passed in a blur. Mother retreated to her bedroom with a bottle of Valium. James alternated between rage-filled tirades and intense meetings with a team of lawyers determined to find a loophole. Rebecca disappeared entirely, not answering calls or texts. And I wandered the halls of our family home like a ghost, trying to reconcile the father I thought I knew with the man who had stolen his friend's life's work and only found the courage to make amends when facing his own mortality. On the third day, after the will reading, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was hesitant but determined. Charlotte? This is Meredith Thornton. I think we should talk. I almost hung up. What could I possibly say to this woman? Congratulations on your newfound wealth. Sorry my father ruined your father's life. But curiosity won out over pride. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, far from the exclusive clubs and restaurants where the Charleston family was known. Professor Thornton, Meredith, looked exactly as I remembered her. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, intelligent eyes behind simple glasses, clothes chosen for comfort rather than style. Thank you for meeting me, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. This situation is unprecedented for both of us. I nodded stiffly. That's one word for it. I want you to know I had no idea about any of this until Mr. Sinclair contacted me, she continued. The story he told me about my father, it filled in so many blanks. Dad never recovered from what happened. He became obsessed with recreating his work, but without resources or connections, he couldn't gain traction. He drank too much, became paranoid. I grew up thinking he was just another failed academic with delusions of grandeur. Something in her voice, not self-pity, but a simple statement of lived reality, cracked the shell of resentment I'd been building. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Your father's letter mentioned you're an art historian?" she asked, changing the subject. "Yes. Specializing in Renaissance art and its mathematical foundations, actually. That's why I took your class." She smiled slightly. "I remember. You were one of my most insightful students." She paused. "Charlotte, I'm not interested in running a technology company. I'm a mathematician, not a businesswoman. But I do want to ensure my father's legacy is properly acknowledged." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm considering setting up a foundation in my father's name, focused on supporting underprivileged students in STEM fields. And I'd like your help with the art collection, not as an employee, but as a partner. Your father's letter mentioned your eye for authenticity." The irony wasn't lost on me. "You're offering me a job evaluating the authenticity of art purchased with stolen ideas." She didn't flinch at my bitterness. "I'm offering you a chance to help me transform something tainted into something meaningful. Neither of us asked for this situation, Charlotte, but we can decide what happens next." I stared at her, this woman who had every reason to hate my family, but was instead offering an olive branch. "Why would you want anything to do with any of us?" Meredith's eyes softened. "Because holding on to anger didn't serve my father well, and because when I look at you, I don't see William Charleston. I see someone who's just had their world turned upside down, trying to find solid ground again." I remember that feeling. As I left the coffee shop, I felt something I hadn't expected, a glimmer of possibility. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps a path forward. The confrontation happened a week later. James had been unsuccessful in his attempts to challenge the will, and his frustration had reached a boiling point. When he discovered I'd met with Meredith, he exploded. "You're betraying your own family," he shouted, cornering me in the library of our soon-to-be former home, cozying up to that woman who's stealing everything that should be ours. "She's not stealing anything, James," I said quietly. "If Father's letter is true, we've been living off stolen innovation our entire lives." "So you believe that convenient story? A deathbed confession that hands everything to a random professor? Don't be naive, Charlotte. It's obviously a forgery, a con job. Mr. Sinclair verified it. The psychological evaluations can be faked." James slammed his fist on the antique desk, making the lamp rattle. "What happened to family loyalty? While you're making friends with the enemy, I've been fighting to save our legacy." "What legacy exactly?" I asked, surprising myself with a steadiness in my voice. "A company built on theft? A family reputation purchased with someone else's genius? Is that what you're so desperate to preserve?" My brother's face contorted with rage, but beneath it, I saw something else: fear. James had never been anything but William Charleston's son and heir. Without the company, who was he? "You never cared about the family business anyway," he said dismissively. "You were always the odd one out, with your dusty paintings and museum internships. Of course this doesn't matter to you." "It matters to me that our father lived a lie and made us complicit in it," I countered. "It matters that a good man's life was destroyed for profit, and it matters that even now, you can't see past your own entitlement to recognize the wrong that was done." "Entitlement?" James laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from you, living off the family money while pretending to be so above it all. At least I worked for my position." His words stung because there was truth in them. I had judged the family business while benefiting from it. I had claimed moral superiority while cashing the checks that made my comfortable life possible. "You're right," I admitted, deflating his anger with unexpected agreement. "I've been hypocritical, but I'm trying to make different choices now." "What choices? Throwing in with that Thornton woman?" "Her name is Meredith. And yes, I'm going to help her establish her father's legacy. Not because I've stopped loving our family, but because it's the right thing to do." James stared at me as if I were speaking a language he couldn't understand. "You're making a mistake, Charlotte. When you come to your senses, don't expect me to welcome you back with open arms." As he stormed out, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking anyone's approval or forgiveness. Not my father's, not my brother's. There was a strange liberation in that, even amid the grief and confusion. The next day, I found Rebecca sitting on the stone bench in the garden, staring at nothing. She'd finally returned home, looking exhausted and hollow-eyed. "Where have you been?" I asked gently, sitting beside her. "Thinking. Researching." Her voice was rough, as if from disuse. "Did you know that Edward Thornton tried to sue Father back in the 80s? The case was dismissed for lack of evidence." I hadn't known. "How did you find that out?" "Newspaper archives. Court records." She turned to look at me, her eyes haunted. "Charlotte, my foundation, the one Father funded so generously, our flagship program provides tech education to underprivileged youth. We've given out the William Charleston Innovators Scholarship for the past 5 years." The bitter irony hit me. A scholarship named after a man who stole innovation. Rebecca nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Everything I've built, all the good I thought I was doing, it was just part of his atonement strategy, a way to ease his conscience without actually facing consequences." I took my sister's hand. "The good you've done is still real, Becca. The students you've helped, the lives you've changed, that's your legacy, not his." "I spoke with Meredith Thornton yesterday," she said, surprising me. "I offered to rename the scholarship after her father." "What did she say?" "She said she'd rather we partner on expanding the program." Rebecca gave a watery laugh. "She's nothing like I expected." "No," I agreed. "She's not." As we sat in the garden our great-grandfather had planted, surrounded by old money and older secrets, I felt something shift between us. Rebecca and I had never been close. She, the perfect daughter balancing social obligations and charitable works. Me, the family rebel who'd rather spend time in museums than at galas. But in this moment of shared disillusionment, we found common ground. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I'm going to help Meredith catalog the art collection, authenticate everything. After that, I don't know. Maybe go back to school, finish my PhD. What about you?" "Stay with the foundation, but on my own terms. It's time I stopped living in Father's shadow, trying to compensate for a family sin I didn't commit." She squeezed my hand. "We're more than the Charleston name, Charlotte. Maybe it's time we figured out who we actually are." I realized then that Father's betrayal, devastating as it was, had given us something unexpected, a chance at authenticity. The carefully constructed Charleston identity had been shattered, but perhaps what might emerge from the wreckage would be more real, more true, than anything we'd had before. 3 months later, I stood in the newly established Edward Thornton Innovation Center, surrounded by the art collection I'd spent weeks cataloging. The space was transformed, no longer a monument to Charleston wealth, but a vibrant hub for education and creativity. The paintings, once status symbols in our family home, now served as inspiration for young minds exploring the intersection of art and technology. Mother had finally emerged from her seclusion, choosing to travel to Europe to find herself, as she put it with uncharacteristic self-awareness. James had taken a position with a rival tech firm in California, his pride wounded, but his ambition intact. Rebecca had restructured her foundation, creating distance from the Charleston name while preserving the programs that truly made a difference. And me? I was discovering that authenticity suited me better than inheritance ever had. "The Caravaggio exhibition is ready for tomorrow's opening," I told Meredith as she joined me in the main gallery. "Though I'm still not convinced that the lute player is authentic." She smiled. "Always the skeptic. That's why you're good at this." We had developed an unexpected friendship over the past months, not without complications given our history, but real nonetheless. I admired her resilience, her lack of bitterness, her forward-thinking approach to a situation that could have devolved into endless litigation and recriminations. "I found something today that I thought you should see," she said, handing me a worn leather journal. It was in a box of my father's things I hadn't gone through yet. I opened it carefully, finding pages of handwritten notes, diagrams, calculations, the original workings of the algorithm that had built the Charleston fortune. "His actual notes," I breathed. "This proves everything." "Yes. Ironically, if he'd had this 40 years ago, your father couldn't have done what he did." She paused. "I'm donating it to the center's permanent collection. The past should be acknowledged, but not dwelled upon." As I flipped through the yellowed pages, I came across a photograph tucked between the leaves, the same one that had sat on my father's desk. 2 young men, arms around each other's shoulders, full of hope and possibility. But this copy had a handwritten note on the back. "Bill and Ed, MIT graduation 1982. The future is ours for the taking." The simple words made my throat tight. 2 brilliant young men, a friendship, a betrayal, decades of consequence flowing from a single terrible choice. Your father would be proud of what you're doing, I said softly. I think, in his own way, yours would be too, Meredith replied. He made a horrible mistake, but in the end, he tried to make it right. Too little, too late, I said, but without the bitterness that would have colored those words months ago. Maybe, but some people never try to make amends at all. As I looked around at what we'd built from the ashes of the Charleston legacy, this center that would nurture innovation rather than steal it, that would honor creative minds rather than exploit them, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The betrayal in my father's will had shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. But in that shattering, something honest had emerged, something real. Later that evening, as I locked up the gallery, my phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I froze. Charlotte, it's James. We need to talk. I found something in Father's personal files that changes everything. Call me. I stared at the screen, my hard-won equilibrium suddenly threatened. What more could there possibly be to discover? What new revelation might be waiting to upend our lives again? With trembling fingers, I dialed my brother's number, bracing myself for whatever truth or lie might be coming next. Because if I'd learned anything from all of this, it was that the past is never truly buried, and sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from those we trust the most. But I also knew now that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. Whatever came next, I would face it with clear eyes and an open heart, no longer hiding behind the Charleston name, but standing firmly as myself. The line connected, and James's voice came through, tense and urgent. Charlotte, you're not going to believe what I found.